In a world where power and profit often drown out compassion, one cold CEO is about to be silenced by an 8-year-old girl with nothing but a notebook and the truth. Her words will shake his empire, and her courage will touch your heart. Stay with us until the end, because this is not just a story, it's a lesson we all need to hear. If you feel it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so more voices like hers can be heard. Marcus Wellington measured life by numbers, and tonight the numbers were good. His Armani shoes clicked across the marble floor of his penthouse office, each step echoing like a metronome set to profit. The San Francisco skyline glowed beyond the glass walls, towers glittering like treasure chests in the rain. But to Marcus it was only a graph, a chart of rising values. His empire had crossed 400 million in valuation that morning, and the thought made his lips curl into something that might have been a smile if it weren't so cold. The desk before him was mahogany, wide enough to host a dinner for 10 but used only for contracts and signatures that carved new scars into paper. 3 monitors glowed with shifting lines and ticker symbols, pulses of a digital heart that fed his ambition. Jennifer, his assistant, entered quietly, placing a folder at the edge of the desk as though she feared coming closer. Her voice carried the tremor of someone handling a venomous animal. "Sir, the Peterson contract needs your signature." Marcus didn't look up. Did they agree to the 15% increase? Jennifer hesitated. She was good at her job, but moments like this made her chest tighten. They're hesitant about the translation services clause. They think it's excessive for what amounts to basic document conversion. He snapped his gaze to her, dark eyes sharp enough to cut. Excessive? His jaw worked as though chewing glass. If they want their software translated into Spanish, they pay premium, period. He signed the papers with strokes so sharp they tore the fibers. Jennifer's conscience flickered to life, weak but stubborn. "Sir, the school district contract specifically mentioned helping underprivileged children. No negotiations." His voice cracked like a whip. "They want our product, they pay our price. I didn't build this company by handing out favors to people too lazy to adapt." He leaned back, arms crossed. "Mark up all translation services 20% minimum from now on. If they want to live in America, they can damn well learn to speak American." The rain outside lashed the glass harder, each droplet a bullet from the storm. Jennifer bit her lip, then nodded. Her mortgage depended on this job. She swallowed the words that threatened to rise and left, her footsteps quiet as retreat. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair spinning behind him. "Family, friendship, charity," he muttered, voice thick with contempt. All weakness disguised as virtue. His father's words echoed in his head, the mantra drilled into him since the day the old man walked out. Money was the only relationship that wouldn't betray you. Money stayed. People left. He slipped into his custom coat, fabric heavy with Italian wool, buttons from Germany gleaming like metals. As he strode to the private elevator, his phone buzzed with an update. His net worth had risen another $50,000 since morning. Satisfaction warmed him more than the coat ever could. The elevator hummed down 40 floors, and with every number that lit up, he felt the pleasure of control. No risks he couldn't calculate, no emotion he couldn't extinguish. To Marcus, the world was a balance sheet, and tonight it was firmly in his favor. Yet as the elevator doors opened to the lobby, the storm seemed to follow him inside. Wind rattled the revolving doors, and the chill of December pressed against the glass. Marcus smoothed his coat, already envisioning the Prestige Club's dining room, the deals to be struck over wine that cost more than some people earned in a month. His driver waited outside beside a gleaming black Tesla, umbrella ready. Marcus walked toward it, each step radiating authority. But just before his hand closed around the handle, something tugged at the edge of his vision. A shadow, small and still, crouched against the side entrance of the building. At first he thought it was a trick of the storm, some discarded bundle soaked through by the rain. But then it shifted, and 2 enormous brown eyes lifted toward him. A girl. A child no more than 8, sitting on a piece of soggy cardboard that once advertised luxury apartments. Her jacket hung off her shoulders, thin as paper, clearly something fished from a donation bin. Her hair clung to her cheeks in tangled strands, and in her hands she clutched a notebook bound with rubber bands, holding it as though it were gold. The driver raised the umbrella, impatient. Traffic to the Marina district would be bad. But Marcus's hand lingered, frozen on the car door handle. The girl's voice, small but cutting through the storm, reached him like a church bell in the night. "Spare change, mister?" And though he answered the same as always, "Get a job." The words felt heavier this time, as though for the first time in years, he had to hear them himself. And something inside him shifted, so small he almost missed it, like the first crack in ice before it breaks. The storm had not lessened. If anything, it grew heavier, sheets of rain painting the city in streaks of silver and neon. Marcus stood there with his hand still hovering above the Tesla's door handle, but his gaze was locked on the little girl pressed against the wall of his building. Her eyes were far too steady for someone her age. No fear, no shame, just quiet defiance, as though she'd been waiting for him. "I said get a job," he repeated, but this time his voice faltered. The words rang hollow, bouncing off the marble columns behind him. The girl tilted her head, rainwater dripping from her tangled hair. "I can't," she said softly, her words a mixture of resignation and razor-edge clarity. "I'm only 8. She lifted the notebook in her hands like an offering, its edges swollen from damp, the pencil stub tucked into its spine. "But I can read and write better than most grown-ups. Want me to show you?" Marcus felt an odd tightness in his chest. He almost laughed to shake it off, but no sound came. Time was ticking. The Prestige Club expected him by 8. Mergers, investors, people who mattered, those were waiting. Yet his feet did not move. Emma flipped open the notebook. Even in the dim light of the overhang, he could see the neat rows of handwriting. Childish yet deliberate, each word pressed into the paper with desperate determination. She pointed at a page filled with purple crayon. "This one's my favorite. It's about a rich man who forgot how to smile because he spent so much time counting his treasures. But then he met a little girl who reminded him that the most valuable things can't be bought." Marcus's throat turned dry. The storm was loud, horns blaring on Montgomery Street, his driver shifting impatiently. But somehow her small voice carved through it all. He crouched before he realized he was doing it, his coat soaking at the edges as rain dripped onto the concrete. "Where are your parents?" he asked, words softer than he intended. "With the Angels," she said matter-of-factly. "A drunk driver, 2 years ago." Her eyes didn't waver. "Since then, I've been here, or at the shelter. Sometimes Mrs. Kim leaves me bread behind her coffee shop." A child shouldn't have been able to speak so calmly about such ruin. Marcus felt something twist in his gut. Emma held the notebook closer, protecting it from the storm with her thin frame. "But I still practice writing every day, just like Miss Santos taught me before the school cut her classes." She said words were like bridges between people's hearts. "You believe that, mister?" Marcus froze. Miss Santos, Roosevelt Elementary. The name clawed at his memory, dragging up something he had signed just days ago, a contract. A school district that had begged for affordable translation services. He had refused. He had laughed. He had called it linguistic welfare, Emma's school. Suddenly he felt the rain soaking through his expensive coat. But colder still was the realization that the ghost of his own signature had stolen this child's classroom, her teacher, her chance at belonging. His phone buzzed, a reminder. Prestige Club, 7:55 p.m., networking dinner. He didn't move to silence it. Emma studied him, those eyes too ancient for her age. "You walk past here every night at 7:15, she said. "Different suit every time, but the same sad look. Why are you sad, mister? You have everything." His heart stuttered. No one had ever asked him that. Not without calculation, not without a price attached. "I'm not sad," he lied. "I'm focused." Emma tilted her head again, almost pitying him. "My mama used to say the loneliest people are the ones who have everything money can buy but nothing their heart really needs." She hugged the notebook tighter. She said money was like salt. A little makes life better, but too much ruins everything. The words hit Marcus like a blow. His father's mantra, "money never betrays," sounded suddenly hollow in the rain. His driver called out, "Sir, we'll be late." But Marcus didn't answer. He was staring at the girl, at her notebook, at the bridge she spoke of. Emma's voice cut through the storm again. "Mister, if you want, I can show you. I can read one of my stories. It's about a man who thought he was strong because he was rich. But he wasn't. He was strong when he learned how to care." Marcus's pulse quickened. A decision sharp and irreversible loomed before him. He could step into his Tesla, glide back into his fortress of wealth, forget this child and her stories, or he could listen, and for reasons he couldn't explain, reasons that unsettled him more than any hostile takeover ever had, he whispered, "Show me." Emma's smile was small but luminous, glowing through the rain like a lantern in the dark. She opened the notebook again, and as her voice began to rise above the storm, Marcus Wellington, the man who thought money was the only relationship worth keeping, felt the first shiver of something he had not allowed himself in 13 years, hope. The rain had thinned to a mist by the time Marcus's Tesla pulled away from Montgomery Street, but inside the car the storm still lived, pounding against his ribs. He sat in silence, staring at the small figure beside him. Emma's thin frame nearly disappeared in the vastness of the leather seat, but her presence filled the entire vehicle with something he couldn't name. "Where are we going?" she asked, voice hushed but steady, as though she already knew. He had no real answer. Marcus's hand hovered over his phone, the glowing screen pulsing with reminders of the dinner he was supposed to attend. 3 potential mergers, 1 billionaire from Seattle, tax strategies whispered over dessert, deals that would fatten his empire, polish his reputation. And yet, the words that came out of his mouth shocked even him. "To your school." Emma blinked, then shook her head. "But it's closed. They locked it when they fired Miss Santos." He gripped the steering wheel tighter, even though his driver was the one navigating through San Francisco's rain-slicked streets. "Someone has the keys," he muttered. He didn't know if that was true, but he knew he had power. And for the first time in years, he wanted to use it for something other than himself. The Tesla glided past skyscrapers that gleamed like altars to profit. Marcus stared at them with disgust, realizing how many of those towers bore his fingerprints, how many contracts had carved futures into stone without mercy. Emma pressed her forehead against the glass, her breath fogging it. "This is where I used to walk with Mama," she whispered. "We'd count the buses on Mission Street. She'd say, 'Someday, mija, you'll ride one of those buses to college.'" Her small hand tightened around her notebook. "But then, the accident." Marcus swallowed hard. Her voice was simple, factual, but it cut deeper than any corporate rival's insult ever had. The Tesla rolled to a stop in front of Roosevelt Elementary. The building loomed like a ghost, its brick walls stained with rain, its windows dark. A faded poster clung to the glass doors announcing in peeling ink, "Bilingual program discontinued due to budget constraints." Marcus felt his stomach twist. He didn't need to read the fine print. His own pen had written this ending. Emma's eyes glistened. "This was my classroom." Her finger lifted toward the second floor, a window reflecting only rain and shadows. Marcus pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling. "Principal Gonzalez," he said when the weary voice answered on the other end. "It's Marcus Wellington. Meet me at the school. Now." "Mr. Wellington, it's past 9. "Now," he repeated, the word heavy with something unfamiliar. Desperation. 20 minutes later, a woman arrived, her coat thrown hastily over pajamas, keys jangling nervously in her hand. She frowned at the Tesla, at Marcus's tailored suit, at the little girl clutching a notebook. "What is this about?" Emma stepped forward before Marcus could speak. "Mrs. Gonzalez, it's me, Emma Rodriguez." The principal's eyes softened, with recognition and pain. "Emma, sweetheart," her voice cracked. "You were one of Miss Santos's brightest." Emma nodded, shy but firm. "I still write every day. I didn't forget." Marcus cleared his throat, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "Open the school." "Why?" Gonzalez asked, suspicion sharp in her eyes. Because I need to see what I destroyed, Marcus admitted. The words shocked him as much as they did her. Inside, the school was silent, the air thick with dust and abandonment. Their footsteps echoed down the hallway, past faded bulletin boards covered in forgotten artwork. Emma's hand brushed the lockers as though she were touching sacred relics. She stopped in front of a door marked 2B. This was my classroom. Through the window, they could see the desks, lined neatly, waiting for students who would never return. The whiteboard still carried faint ghosts of Spanish and English words, scrawled in Miss Santos's hand. Encouragements that now no child could hear. Emma pressed her palm against the glass. Miss Santos said being bilingual was like having 2 keys, one for each world. She said we could open any door. Marcus felt his throat constrict. He saw his reflection in that glass. Perfect suit, polished shoes, superimposed over empty desks and a little girl's grief. He had called those keys linguistic welfare. Now he saw what they truly were. Lifelines. He turned to the principal. His voice was raw. Tomorrow morning, call her back. Tell Miss Santos her job is waiting. Tell the district the program is reinstated. Full translation services, every textbook, every lesson, every digital platform. No exceptions. Cost is irrelevant. Bill it as charity if you need to. Just do it. Gonzalez's eyes widened. You mean? Marcus nodded sharply. Yes, tonight. I'll sign whatever I have to. Emma's breath hitched, her eyes shining with hope so fierce it was almost painful to look at. Does this mean I can come back? Marcus knelt, his expensive trousers soaking in the dust of the abandoned hallway. Yes, Emma, he whispered, his voice trembling like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. Tomorrow. And for the first time in 13 years, Marcus Wellington realized he had signed something not to build his fortune, but to save a child. The penthouse had always been a museum of wealth, marble counters without fingerprints, chrome fixtures polished until they gleamed like ice, furniture so expensive it looked uncomfortable to touch. Marcus had built his sanctuary in the sky to keep the world out, a glass fortress where nothing living could clutter the perfection. But the morning after Roosevelt Elementary came back to life, the fortress cracked. Emma entered barefoot, carrying her notebook like a sacred relic, her hair still damp from a shower she insisted on taking, all by myself. She stopped in the middle of the living room, her gaze sweeping the endless white walls, the art chosen by decorators, the silence that pressed against the glass. It feels empty, she said softly. Marcus blinked. No investor, no competitor, no journalist had ever dared describe his home that way. He had paid millions for this view of the bay, for the symmetry of his imported sculptures, for the soundless hum of climate control. But in the mouth of an 8-year-old girl, the word empty was not an insult. It was truth. She climbed onto the couch with her knees tucked under her chin and pulled out crayons from her jacket pocket. Within minutes, the sterile coffee table was covered with color. Suns, bridges, and words scribbled in uneven lines. The smell of wax and paper filled the air, clashing with the faint cologne that usually lingered. Marcus stood frozen, watching chaos bloom where order had reigned. Later that afternoon, Jennifer entered with contracts for review. Her eyes widened at the sight. Emma sprawled on the floor, drawing castles while Marcus sat beside her with papers ignored, watching her every stroke as if it were more important than stock prices. Jennifer almost dropped the folder. Sir? She stammered. The quarterly projections. Push them, Marcus said without looking up. His voice was calm, but it carried a weight Jennifer had never heard. Emma looked up at him. What's pushing? It means the papers can wait, he said. And then, to his own shock, he smiled. The days that followed remade the penthouse. Children's books stacked against business journals. A small desk placed near the massive windows where Emma wrote her stories as the city woke up. Her laughter bounced off the marble, filling spaces money had never managed to warm. But change did not stay contained to his home. At the office, Marcus stunned his executives. He announced mandatory mental health benefits. He ordered a diversity and inclusion overhaul. He approved full scholarships for underprivileged students, personally funding the first 25. Success without conscience, he told them. is just sophisticated selfishness. The boardroom fell silent. For once, no one dared to argue. Yet, even as Marcus began to shed his old skin, shadows gathered at the edges of this fragile new life. Sarah Chen, the social worker who visited weekly, leaned across his glass desk one evening, her voice measured. "Emma's thriving. Her test results are extraordinary. Her attachment to you is strong, but—" Marcus stiffened. He knew that tone. There was always a but. Sarah folded her hands. "We've located a relative, her father's younger brother, Roberto Rodriguez. He's been working construction in Texas. He just found out about the accident and about Emma." The words landed like a blade. Marcus felt his chest hollow out. "And what does he want?" "He wants to meet her. He believes family should take care of family." Sarah hesitated, eyes flicking to the drawings covering his desk. "Legally, he has rights. Blood relatives are given priority in custody." Marcus turned toward the window, the glittering skyline now a cage instead of a conquest. Below, the city pulsed with life, but all he could hear was Emma's voice calling his penthouse empty. He had filled it. She had filled it. Now the law threatened to take her away. That evening, as Emma read aloud from her notebook in both English and Spanish, her voice carrying the rhythm of Miss Santos's lessons, Marcus sat silently beside her. Every word was a miracle. Every. Pause a countdown, she looked up at him with those unwavering eyes. "Papa Marcus, why do you look so sad again?" He forced a smile. "Just business." But his heart was racing because he knew. The battle for Emma hadn't even begun, and somewhere in Texas, a man with the same eyes as her father was preparing to knock on his door. The knock on the penthouse door came at exactly 10 a.m. Saturday morning. Marcus had barely slept, pacing through the night like a man waiting for a verdict. Emma was in her room, humming softly as she braided the hair of a doll she'd found in a thrift shop. Her laughter floated down the hall, piercing Marcus. With equal parts joy and fear, he knew the sound might not belong to him much longer. When the door swung open, Sarah Chen stood there with her calm, watchful eyes, and beside her, a man whose presence filled the doorway before he spoke. Roberto Rodriguez. 35, shoulders broad from years of work, hands rough with calluses. His dark eyes mirrored Emma's, steady, mournful, determined. "Mr. Wellington," he said, extending his hand with quiet dignity. "Thank you for seeing me." Marcus took the hand, feeling the strength in his grip. But beneath it was something more dangerous than strength, legitimacy, blood. A sound of small footsteps pattered across the marble. Emma peeked from the hallway, notebook pressed against her chest like a shield. Her eyes landed on the stranger, then widened. She descended the stairs slowly, one step at a time, studying his face. "You look like Papa," she whispered. Same eyes, same nose. Roberto's composure cracked. Tears welled as he knelt to her level. "Mija, I am so sorry. I didn't know. If I had—" His voice broke, swallowed by grief. "Your papa was my brother. I should have protected you." Emma tilted her head with childlike bluntness. "Where were you?" His answer came haltingly. "Working construction in Texas. No phone, no internet. I sent money home to Abuela every month. When cousin Maria saw the news about you, I drove 2 days without stopping." Marcus watched, his heart splintering. He saw it clearly. The resemblance, the history, the claim this man carried. A claim no wealth could erase. Emma stepped closer, her gaze fierce despite her size. "Tell me about Papa when he was little." Roberto's face softened. "He was the smart one, always reading, always dreaming of bringing us to America. He taught me English every night after work. He said education was the only inheritance he could give us that no one could steal." Emma nodded solemnly. "He told me the same thing. Words are more valuable than gold." A silence stretched in the room, taut as wire. Marcus broke it, his voice low. "Emma has been the greatest gift of my life. She's changed everything about who I am and what I believe." Roberto looked at him with no hatred, only gravity. I believe that, but she is my blood. Family takes care of family, it is our honor. Emma looked between them, clutching her notebook tighter. If I go with you, Tio Roberto, where would I live? A small apartment in Houston. Safe. Clean. A school nearby with other Mexican kids. You could learn our songs, our stories, speak Spanish every day. She turned to Marcus, her voice barely audible. And Mr. Marcus? Roberto's expression softened. He would always be welcome to visit. I'm not trying to erase him. But you are a Rodriguez. That means something. Emma's eyes flashed, with something stronger than fear. She hugged her notebook to her chest. I need to think, is that okay? Can I go to my room and think? Both men nodded, watching her climb the stairs. Each step weighted with a decision no child should carry. Silence pressed against them after she disappeared. Roberto spoke first. She is very mature for 8. Too mature, Marcus said hoarsely. She's had to make adult decisions her whole life. I was hoping to change that. Roberto studied him, eyes narrowing. You really love her. Marcus didn't flinch. More than I ever thought I was capable of loving anyone. Roberto sighed, rubbing his temples. Then we are both trapped. Honor pulls me one way. Love pulls you another. But what of her? Before Marcus could answer, a voice drifted from upstairs, clear and unwavering. Uncle Roberto. Mr. Marcus. Come here, I want to show you something. They climbed the stairs together, hearts heavy. In her room, Emma sat at her desk, surrounded by pages of her careful handwriting. She looked up at them with eyes far too wise for her age. I wrote a story, she said, her voice steady. It's about a girl who lost her family in an accident, and then she found 2 families who loved her in different ways. Marcus and Roberto froze, the weight of her words sinking like anchors. The girl, Emma continued, realized she didn't have to choose. She could have both if everyone was brave enough to love, even when it was complicated. The silence that followed was not empty. It was charged like the air before lightning splits the sky. For the first time, Marcus and Roberto looked at each other not as rivals, but as men staring into the mirror of a child's impossible wisdom. Emma's. Words lingered in the air long after she closed her notebook. The room was silent except for the steady rhythm of rain against the penthouse windows. But in that silence, Marcus felt something shifting, dangerous and unstoppable. Like the tremor before an earthquake. She had spoken of bridges, of not choosing, of both. But the world outside her small, luminous imagination was not so merciful. That night, Marcus stood alone by the glass wall of his office while Emma slept down the hall, curled under blankets she'd arranged into a nest. Her soft breathing was the only sound that made the penthouse feel alive. Yet his phone buzzed with news that ripped that fragile sense of peace to shreds. Roberto sat across from him, a manila envelope heavy in his hands. His usually steady expression had collapsed into something pale and anxious. They came today, Roberto said. His voice was steady, but his knuckles were white against the paper. From Guadalajara, the Mexican courts. Abuela Carmen has been fighting for 2 years. She's won. Marcus's heart dropped like a stone. Won what? Guardianship. Roberto slid the papers across the desk. The official seal glared up at Marcus like a verdict. They are ordering me to bring Emma back within 30 days. Marcus couldn't breathe. He saw the sterile penthouse filling again with silence, with absence. He saw Emma's crayon suns erased, her desk by the window standing empty, the laughter gone. This can't happen, he muttered, voice breaking. There has to be a way to fight it. Appeals, international custody law, diplomatic channels. I've already spoken to lawyers, Roberto interrupted, his own anguish plain. Because both her parents were Mexican citizens, because the family has been seeking her all this time, because cultural continuity matters. The courts favor sending her back. They'll say she belongs in Mexico, with her heritage. Marcus pressed his hands into his hair, his control unraveling. She belongs with the people who love her, not with papers stamped by strangers. And then a sound froze them both. A chair scraped across the floor in the hallway. small footsteps. Emma stood in the doorway, eyes wide, clutching her notebook to her chest. "Stop talking about me like I'm not here," she said, her voice quivering with fury. "I'm not a suitcase you can pass around. I'm me. I have thoughts. I have feelings." The men went silent, struck down by the storm in her voice. Tears burned in her eyes as she pressed the notebook tighter. "Do you know what I want? I want my parents back. I want to stop being the reason good people fight. I want to stop being the prize in some contest I never asked for." She spun and fled down the hall, slamming her door. Marcus felt gutted, his lungs empty. Roberto dropped his head into his hands, shoulders shaking. "She's right. We're failing her. We swore we wouldn't, but we are." For the first time, there was no argument, only truth. An hour later, they found her at her desk, surrounded by crumpled pages, her eyes red but determined. She looked up at them, voice ragged but steady. "I'm writing to Abuela," she said. Marcus crouched beside her. "Emma, this isn't your responsibility." "Yes, it is," she interrupted. "I'm the one everyone is fighting about. I'm the one who has to live with whatever gets decided. I have to try to explain." Her small hand smoothed a fresh page. "Dear Abuela," she began, voice trembling but fierce. "I know you love me and want me to come live with you in Mexico because that's where Papa grew up. I know you've been fighting for me for 2 years, and that shows how much you care. But I need you to understand something." Marcus and Roberto exchanged a look, their throats thick. Emma's eyes filled, but her words grew stronger. "I found a family here too. Not just one, but 2. Tio Roberto, who came because of duty, but stayed because of love. And Papa Marcus, who wasn't blood, but who healed my heart and made me believe in hope again. I don't want to lose Mexico. I don't want to lose San Francisco. I want both. I want summers with Abuela, school here with my new family. I want to be a bridge between 2 worlds, not a child forced to choose one." She set down her pencil, her hand trembling. "That's what I want. That's what I'll tell her." Marcus's vision blurred. Roberto reached out and squeezed Emma's shoulder, his tears falling freely. In that small room, filled with scattered stories and broken dreams stitched back together by a child's hand, Marcus understood what real courage looked like. Not in the boardroom, not in empires, but in an 8-year-old girl who had just taught 2 men, and maybe 2 nations, how to love. The letter reached Guadalajara faster than Marcus expected. Roberto had translated every word with care, carrying it to a family lawyer who delivered it to Abuela Carmen. Yet days later, no reply had come. The silence gnawed at Marcus, every hour stretching longer than the last. The school mornings continued. Emma skipped down the steps with her notebook tucked in her backpack, her eyes bright when she waved to Miss Santos. Marcus forced himself to smile back, but inside his chest, a shadow grew heavier, because every laugh, every story, every bedtime hug felt like it might be the last. One evening, as they gathered for Sunday dinner in Marcus's penthouse, the doorbell rang. Roberto opened it, and a courier handed him a thick envelope stamped with the seal of the Mexican consulate. Marcus's heart lurched. They tore it open at the table. Inside was the reply they dreaded. A formal notice. The Mexican family court recognized Abuela Carmen's guardianship as valid and binding. Emma was to be returned within 30 days. The words blurred as Marcus read them, his throat burning. 30 days. 30 days until silence reclaimed his home. 30 days until the bridges Emma dreamed of collapsed into borders and laws. Emma's fork clattered onto her plate. "What does it say?" Roberto hesitated, but Marcus couldn't lie. "They want you to live in Mexico, sweetheart, with Abuela." The light drained from her face. "So that's it? I just disappear again?" "No," Marcus said sharply, standing so suddenly his chair scraped the floor. "We fight." He grabbed his phone, dialing David Martinez, his international custody lawyer. "File an appeal. I don't care what it costs. Argue best interest, stability, education, anything." David's voice crackled through the speaker. "Marcus, listen to me. Mexican law favors cultural continuity. They'll argue she belongs in her homeland surrounded by blood relatives. Marcus slammed his fist onto the table. She belongs where she is loved. Emma flinched at the sound, her small shoulders trembling. Marcus instantly regretted it. He crouched beside her, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't lose you. Emma looked at him with eyes too steady for a child. You won't. Not really. You said love isn't about papers. It's about what follows you, right? Marcus's vision blurred. She had thrown his own lesson back at him. The weeks that followed were consumed by meetings and filings. Roberto sat with lawyers. Marcus wired retainers that would make most men faint. Depositions were drafted, affidavits signed, experts hired. The fight stretched across 2 countries, legal systems clashing like steel. Yet in the middle of the chaos, Emma wrote. Pages and pages. Stories about bridges, about families that didn't break but bent until they held everyone. She wrote her fears into fairy tales, her tears into fables, and every night she left one page on Marcus's desk. Then came the hearing. The courtroom was nothing like the boardrooms Marcus had conquered. No polished table, no digital charts, only wood worn smooth by decades of battles over children's lives. On one side sat Roberto and Marcus, an unlikely alliance forged by love. On the other side, a lawyer representing Abuela Carmen, her photograph placed on the bench like a silent witness. Emma sat between the men, her notebook clutched in both hands. The judge's eyes softened when they landed on her, but his tone was firm. Child custody across borders is not simple. Blood family carries weight. Cultural preservation carries weight. This case is unusual. Marcus stood, heart pounding. Your Honor, this girl is more than a case file. She is the reason I breathe. She has given my life meaning again. She has turned me into the man I should have been all along. Please, don't take her away. The judge's gaze moved to Roberto. And you? What do you say? Roberto's voice was raw. She is my blood. I carry my brother's promise. But she is also his legacy, his dream. And dreams don't belong to one country. They belong wherever a child can thrive. The judge leaned forward. And the child? What does she say? Emma's small voice carried through the courtroom like a bell. I already wrote it down. She rose, walked forward, and handed her notebook to the judge. Inside was her letter. The same words she had spoken that night at her desk. The plea to be a bridge. Summers in Mexico. School in San Francisco. 2 families instead of 1. The judge read in silence, the only sound the rain tapping against tall windows. When he finished, he looked at her over his glasses. You are a remarkable child, he said softly. And sometimes the wisest voices come from those the law often ignores. Marcus's heart hammered as the judge closed the notebook. I cannot ignore Mexican law. But neither can I ignore the child's voice. I will grant temporary dual arrangement pending further review. Summers in Mexico, school year in San Francisco. Emma gasped, clutching Marcus's hand in one and Roberto's in the other. So, I don't have to choose? The judge's gavel struck once, final and echoing. No, child, you don't have to choose. You just have to be brave enough to belong to both. Marcus closed his eyes, tears slipping free. It wasn't victory. It wasn't defeat. It was something new, a bridge. The departure lounge at San Francisco International Airport smelled faintly of coffee and jet fuel, but to Marcus it smelled like loss. He knelt on the tile floor in front of Emma, his hands trembling as he adjusted the straps of her backpack for the 3rd time. Inside was her notebook, worn at the edges, and a fresh journal he had given her the night before. Embossed on its leather cover were the words, For every story you'll live and every story you'll write. Emma grinned up at him, gap-toothed and fearless, though he could see the flicker of nerves in her eyes. I already started one, she whispered. About flying above the clouds, I called it Bridges in the Sky. Roberto stood nearby, holding their boarding passes, his shoulders squared, his face tight. It was his job to take her to Guadalajara, to help her cross the threshold into a family she'd only known through photographs and stories. Behind his calm stance, Marcus could see his own ache reflected, pride braided with pain. Emma's voice wobbled for the first time as she glanced toward the jet bridge. "Papa Marcus, will it be weird? Meeting cousins I don't know? Sleeping in a room that used to be Mama's?" He brushed a damp strand of hair from her forehead. "It might feel strange at first, but strange isn't bad. It just means you're about to learn something new. And you're not alone. You'll have Tio Roberto, Abuela Carmen, all your cousins. And every night you'll have me. Call, write, send me your stories. I'll be waiting." She studied his face with that unnerving clarity she always carried. "You look like you're breaking inside." The honesty stole his breath. "Because I am," he admitted. "Letting you go, even for a little while. It feels like my heart is walking away." Her small hand cupped his cheek, a gesture far older than her years. "Then keep it safe until I come back. I'll bring it with me again." Roberto cleared his throat, voice low but steady. "We should board." Emma hugged Marcus fiercely, wrapping her arms around his neck with a strength that startled him. "I love you more than all the zeros in your bank account," she whispered against his ear. "And you can't put that in any spreadsheet." He laughed through the tears that burned his eyes. "Then it must be the greatest wealth I'll ever have." They walked together to the gate. Emma stopped once, turning back to wave at him. Her smile was bright enough to light the terminal. On the plane, seated between Roberto and the window, she pressed her nose to the glass as the ground fell. Away, San Francisco shrank into a toy city, the bridges reduced to threads of silver over water. She clutched her notebook and began to write. In Guadalajara, the airport was a blaze of color and sound. Abuela Carmen waited at the arrival hall, her hair silver, her eyes wet with years of longing. When Emma emerged, the old woman opened her arms and cried, "Mija!" Emma froze for a heartbeat, overwhelmed by the flood of cousins, uncles, and aunts rushing forward, their voices a chorus. Of Spanish she half understood, but then she stepped into her grandmother's embrace. "You smell like Mama's kitchen," she murmured, tears spilling freely. Carmen stroked her hair, kissing her forehead. "And you are the light of your papa's eyes. Bienvenida a casa." That night, Emma lay in a room filled with relics of her parents, photographs, toys, the lullabies still echoing in the walls. She traced her mother's handwriting in the margins of an old cookbook and whispered, "I know you're here." But even as she drifted into sleep surrounded by family, her hand never loosened around the leather journal Marcus had given her. In San Francisco, Marcus sat at Emma's small desk by the window, staring at the empty chair. Outside, the city glittered as if nothing had changed, but inside everything was hollow. On the desk lay a page she'd torn from her notebook before leaving. In her neat, careful handwriting were just 4 words: "Don't forget to hope." Marcus bowed his head, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. The bridges she'd spoken of were real. They stretched across borders, across bloodlines, across grief itself. But the weight of absence pressed heavy. He whispered into the silence, "Come back to me, Emma." And for the first time in his life, Marcus Wellington prayed, not to money, not to power, but to the fragile, miraculous chance that love could hold across oceans. The summer sun in Guadalajara was nothing like San Francisco's sharp, misty light. It was golden, heavy, almost alive, pouring across tiled rooftops and filling narrow streets with warmth. Emma woke each morning to the smell of corn tortillas, sizzling on Abuela Carmen's stove, and the sound of cousins already playing football in the courtyard. For the first time in 2 years, she was surrounded by family who shared her father's laugh, her mother's dimples, her eyes. Abuela sang her the songs her papa had grown up with, lullabies layered with history, grief, and love. Uncles told stories of fields worked by hand, of ancestors who carried resilience in their bones. Emma listened to everything, soaking it in, scribbling furiously into her leather journal, every page filled with new Spanish words, new traditions, recipes, songs. She was learning her roots, breathing them in. Yet at night, when the house grew quiet and the cousins' laughter faded, She would sit on the balcony under a blanket of stars and whisper to herself, "But my bridge goes both ways," because every sunrise in Mexico carried a shadow of San Francisco, of Papa Marcos, of the desk by the window where she used to write while he worked, of the way his voice had trembled when he told her he couldn't breathe at the thought of losing her. She wrote letters to him daily, sealing them with drawings of suns and bridges. "Dear Papa Marcos," she wrote in looping letters, "today Abuela taught me how to make tamales. I burned one, but she laughed and said, 'I have my mama's stubborn hands.' I laughed too, but then I cried because I missed you. Do you eat lunch like I told you to? Don't forget. I love you more than your bank account." In San Francisco, Marcos read every letter as though it were oxygen. His penthouse had changed. Emma's drawings still on the walls, her crayons still rolling across the marble floor where he had refused to move them. But without her, it felt like a stage after the actors had left. He threw himself into her, into proving he was not just a rich man with a guilty conscience. His company funded bilingual programs citywide. Scholarships doubled. Policies shifted. People whispered in the financial district that Marcus Wellington had gone soft. But investors saw something else, humanity that inspired loyalty. Still, when he lay awake at night, the victories felt hollow. He stared at the empty desk by the window and felt the ache of a missing heartbeat. One evening, Sarah Chen visited. She set down her folder, her expression tight. "The Mexican courts are reconsidering," she said. "Extended family has filed new petitions. They argue Emma should remain permanently in Mexico." Marcus felt his blood go cold. "But we had an agreement. Summers there, school here." "Agreements bend under pressure," Sarah said softly. "Especially when politics get involved. There's momentum to keep her there for good." The room tilted around him. He gripped the edge of the desk, fighting the roar in his ears. "No, I can't lose her, not again." Sarah's eyes softened. "Then fight harder. But understand, this won't be about money. It'll be about who she is, where she belongs." Marcus sank into his chair, staring at the page Emma had left him before she flew. "Don't forget to hope." And yet hope felt thin, fragile, like paper soaked by rain. In Guadalajara, Emma sensed the tension before anyone told her. Cousins whispered. Abuela wept quietly when she thought Emma was asleep. One night, overhearing a hushed argument between Roberto and Carmen, Emma scribbled into her journal with shaking hands, "Why is love always a fight? Why can't they see that I am not a rope to be pulled from one hand to another?" The next morning, she folded the page into a letter for Marcus. "Papa Marcus, they say I might not come back, but I need you to know something. You already gave me what I wanted most. You saw me. You loved me. Even if the courts take me away, you'll never lose me. Because I am your daughter no matter what, the papers say." When Marcus read those words alone in his penthouse, his knees gave out. He pressed the letter to his chest, tears falling freely for the first time since his own father had left him years ago. But as he wept, a single thought burned through the despair: they will not take her from me, not without a fight. He stood, eyes blazing with the ferocity that had once built empires. Only this time it wasn't for profit. It was for a little girl who had taught him the difference between money and meaning. The war for Emma's future was about to begin. The courtroom in Guadalajara was packed tighter than Marcus had ever seen. Reporters jostled for space, their cameras flashing like lightning against the old wood benches. Lawyers shuffled papers, their whispers sharp as knives. The air was heavy with expectation, the kind that meant lives were about to be rewritten. Marcus sat stiffly at the front, his palms sweating despite the chilled air. Roberto sat beside him, steady but pale, his jaw tight. Sarah Chen leaned forward from the row behind, whispering, "This is it. Whatever happens today will define Emma's future." And then the doors opened. Abuela Carmen entered slowly, leaning. On her cane, her silver hair pulled back tightly, her black shawl draped around her shoulders like armor. Though small in stature, her presence filled the room. Her eyes, deep and sharp, moved from Roberto to Marcus before settling on Emma. Emma sat between the two men, her notebook clutched to her chest as if it were a shield and a sword all at once. When Carmen's gaze found her, the old woman's face softened, breaking under years of grief. "Mija," she whispered, her voice trembling. Emma stood and walked to her grandmother, slipping into her arms with a grace that silenced the entire courtroom. The sight of them, generations bound by loss, struck something deep in everyone present. The judge cleared his throat. "Señora Rodriguez, you petition for permanent guardianship of the child. Mr. Wellington and Mr. Rodriguez oppose. Today you will each speak. But first," he paused, glancing at the little girl who refused to let go of her notebook. Perhaps the child herself should be heard. Emma stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but her voice carried clear. "I don't want to be a prize people win or lose. I don't want to be sent away like luggage. I want both my families. I want summers in Mexico with Abuela and cousins. I want school in San Francisco with Papa Marcus and Tio Roberto. I want to be a bridge." The words hit the room like thunder. Even the judge leaned back shaken. But it was Carmen who broke the silence. She rose, her cane tapping against the floor as she moved toward the bench. "Your Honor," she said, her Spanish translated for the court, "I have fought for 2 years to bring my granddaughter home. I thought it was my duty as a mother who lost her son. I thought the only way to honor him was to raise her myself, in his land, with his family." She paused, her eyes wet, her voice breaking. "But then I read her letter." A murmur rippled through the court. Marcus felt his heart hammer against his ribs. "In her letter," Carmen continued, pulling a folded page from her shawl, "she told me she already has 2 families. She told me she wants to belong to both. She told me love is bigger than borders. And I realized," her voice cracked into a sob, "she is right. She is wiser than all of us. What good is fighting if it makes her heart smaller? What good is winning if it makes her lose the bridge she is trying to build?" Tears blurred Marcus's vision. Roberto's breath shuddered beside him. The judge leaned forward. "Are you saying, Señora, that you wish to withdraw your petition?" Carmen nodded slowly. "Yes. I do not want to break what she has built. Let her have both. Summers with me, school with them. Let her carry all of us in her heart." She turned to Emma, tears streaking her cheeks. "Forgive me, Mija, for trying to make you choose when you already chose something bigger." Emma ran into her grandmother's arms, sobbing, but this time they were tears of relief, not fear. The judge struck his gavel once. "So ordered. Dual guardianship arrangement confirmed. This court recognizes the unique solution proposed by the child herself." The room erupted, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, but Marcus heard none of it. He was already on his knees, arms open as Emma ran back to him. She leapt into his embrace, wrapping herself around him with the fierce strength of a child who had fought too long to belong. "You see," she whispered against his ear. "I told you. Bridges." Marcus held her tighter, his tears soaking her hair. "You were right, Emma. You were right about everything." And then, as the courtroom buzzed with disbelief, a truth struck Marcus, like a bolt of lightning, a shocking reveal that left him breathless. He wasn't just fighting for Emma. He was becoming who he was always meant to be because of her. In her stories, she had written of a sad rich man who forgot how to smile. She had written of a lonely king in a glass tower. She had written of a girl who turned invisible, until she made herself seen. And in that moment, Marcus realized with stunning clarity, Emma had written this ending before it ever happened. She had written him back into life. He pressed his forehead to hers. "You saved me, Emma, not the other way around." And as cameras captured the sight of a billionaire broken open by an 8-year-old girl, the world outside began to whisper a new story, not of money or power or profit, but of a child who silenced a millionaire by teaching him the one language he had forgotten: love.